Guys, you're welcome back. In this video, we are going to have an introduction to group policy. Now, group policy is the infrastructure that allows you to create and implement specific configurations for users and computers. Group policy settings are contained in group policy objects, which are linked to the following Active Directory service containers, sites, domains, or organizational units. Now, the settings in the group policies are then evaluated by users by the affected targets using the hierarchical nature of the Active Directory. Consequently, group policy is one of the top reasons to deploy Active Directory because it allows you to manage users and computer objects. So when we talk about group policy, whenever you think of a way to define or specify how users can access the system and what they can do on the system, then the guy you are looking for is group policy. So let's go to the DC1 and then let me walk you through group policy. So I'm on my domain controller. We go to server manager. Then group policy can be accessed under tools. So when your server manager loads and you go to tools, you should see group policy management. Group policy management. Now when you open the group policy management console, you are going to see first the forest. Then when you expand the forest, we have domains, sites, group policy modeling, and then group policy results. Now let us expand the domains. When you expand the domains, now you have your domain in there, louis.com. Then when you expand your domain, you are going to see the containers that you created in louis.com and then other containers. By default, when you install Active Directory, two policies are created. One is the default domain policy, which specifies the default configuration settings and security settings that apply to users that connect to this system or the domain. Then you have the domain controller policy, default domain controller policy, which also define the default security settings for the domain controllers. So whenever you wish to create any group policy, all group policies are created under the group policy object. All group policies are created under the group policy object. So you can expand the group policy object and then you will notice that you have the default domain controllers policy and the default domain policy all underneath it. Then when you look at the ones you have at the top here, it looks like it has a shortcut sign there. This is because these are links. So whenever you create a policy, for the policy to actually take effect on any user, you have to link the policy to an object in Active Directory. You can link it to a domain if you want the policy to apply to the entire domain, or you can link it to an organizational unit if you want the policy to apply to an organizational unit, or you can link it to a site if you want the policy to apply to an entire site. So it depends on the scope of how far you want the policy to go. Now, creating a group policy object is simple. All you have to do is right click on the group policy objects and then select new, and then you can specify a name for the policy depending on what you want the policy to be doing. So let's say we call our policy test. Then we can click OK. Now what I have created now, let's compare something. Let me click on the default domain policy and then go to settings. It's going to generate a report for me. Let me just close this out of here for now. You notice that there are certain security settings within here, but what we have created does not have these security settings. It actually has nothing. So what you have created is absolutely nothing unless you add a security template or a security settings to it. So for a policy to actually do what you want it to do, it needs to be edited and then a security settings applied to it. So let's right click on the policy we have created and then go to edit. Now when you right click, this is going to bring up the security, the group policy management editor. Now in group policy, there are two main settings or configuration settings that can be done. We have the computer configurations and then we have the user configuration. Now under both computer configuration and user configuration, we have policies and we have preferences. Policies contains predefined security settings that can be applied to a group policy object. Preferences allows you to personalize the group policy setting to suit the way you actually want it to be. So under each of them, when you expand the policies, you are going to see software settings, Windows settings, and then administrative template. The same thing applies to user configuration. Now, the software settings allows you to install a software for users on the network using group policy. Windows settings contains various security settings that can be defined for users or computers that apply to the Windows itself. Then we have the administrative template, consists of other security settings for the various sections of the Windows. Talk about network, printers, servers, start menu, but the options you have under computer configuration may not be the same options you are going to get under user configuration. For example, when you look at user configuration here, we have desktop, but then desktop does not come under computer configuration. So each of these has a set of security settings. Let me click all settings here. And there are 1001 security settings that can be applied. So if, for example, I am interested in any of these, let me just see what I can be interested in. Let me just pick up anything random. We are not actually being specific about any policy for now, so I'm just going to be random and then just pick any of these. I want something familiar. Let me go to control panel. Let me just be specific. Go to control panel and then probably personalization, and then do not display the lock screen, or prevent changing start menu background, or force. No, let me do it under user configuration, control panel here, and then let me just say prohibit access to control panel. Let me just say this is what I want to do. Then I double click on this. Then there is a description of what this policy does here. So if you don't know what the policy will actually be doing for you, there is a description that tells you exactly what the policy is going to do. So it says it disables all control panel programs and the PC settings app. So by default it is not configured, so we can decide to enable it. Once we enable it, then we can click apply and then say okay. We can add so many settings to one policy depending on what you want it to do. You can add so many settings to it. Then after you are satisfied with the settings and everything that you want, the next thing is you just click close. You close the group policy management editor. Now the policy, if I should refresh this and close, this policy now has some settings assigned to it. So the next thing is I have to link the policy. When I go to scope, let me close out of here. The policy is not linked to anything, so I have to link the policy. To link a policy, you can do it in two ways. You can either drag the policy and drop it on the object. If it is a domain or an OU, you can just drop it on it. Or you can also right click on the object and then select link an existing GPO. Then you can select the policy you wish to link like this, and then I'll say okay. Then it has been linked. Now when you come to the security filtering, you have to be very cautious here, especially if the policy you are setting is a restrictive policy. You have to make sure it does not say authenticated users, or if it say authenticated users, you have to go and exempt the administrator if you don't want this policy to apply to the administrator. So we'll walk through how to make exemptions and all that. Then after you have linked the policy, the next thing is you have to update the group policy settings. So we can just bring up the Windows key R and then CMD. Then we use a command called gp update /force to update the group policy settings. So I hit enter and it's going to update the group policy settings. Once this is done, the policy is going to be applied, and then I will try to access control panel from the client system, and let's see what happens. So I come to the client system. Let me log on. and then I'll try to access control panel from here. So take my cursor to the edge, settings, control panel. Really, I'm coming. Let me do this. Let me actually sign out and then sign in. And then try to access control panel again. Come here. It says that this operation has been cancelled due to restriction in effect on this computer. Please contact your system administrator. Most of the time when a policy is applied, sometimes you may be required to restart the system, or you may be required to log off and log in for the system to take effect, or probably due to the nature of your network, it might take a little time for the policy to take effect on your system. So in general, this is how group policy works. That is the general concept behind group policy. So in the next video, we are going to be specific, look at some policies that we can set, and then look at how to go about it. So I'll see you in the next video. If this video was helpful, like it, share it, comment, subscribe to the page. Thank you.